Mark, and welcome back to another episode of Powering Your Productivity. Hey, today we're going to talk about labor hours. If you remember in our last video, we've been talking about what is capacity and how do we get to capacity. Today we're going to be talking about the labor hours that are affiliated with that capacity. So if you remember our last example, we were talking about we had our slicer, we had our multi-vac, and we had our pack off. Well, today we want to talk about the labor requirements that are needed for that capacity. So in this example, say we have one operator that is required for the slicer. Say we have two operators that are required for our multi-vac, and say we have two operators that are required for our pack-off station. So what this means from a labor hour perspective is that we have 5 individuals or 5 operators that are working our line. So when we talk about what is a labor hour, well, each individual that works one complete hour would be the labor hours required for that line. So if we have 5 operators, this is actually going to equal 5 labor hours every hour that we need to run the line. After we've identified that we know that we're going to have 5 labor hours to run the line, now what we need to do is we now have a place that we can put a measurement in place. So now that we know it's 5 labor hours, every hour that we go to measure our line and our productivity, we're gonna know that we're gonna need 5 labor hours each hour to complete that. So if we ran our line for 5 hours straight, we would have 25 total labor hours, okay? So now that we know what our labor requirements are, we remember what our capacity was for our 3 pieces of assets that we're running on our line. Now what we need to do is we need to ensure that that's the right number. So there's a couple ways you could do that. For plants that have already been going or facilities that have already been up and running, you can usually go to your planning and scheduling department, and these folks will be able to tell you what the requirements are for your line. So if say you're running a particular product, they may say, hey, supervisor, you're gonna be running product 1, 2, 3 today. You need to do that with 4 people. And these are the units in which you need to hit to complete that product. So that's one way to do it. The second way that you could do it is also you could go out there and do your own time studies. When we talk about time studies, I always tell people you don't have to get out there with a stopwatch to get out there and do it. Just go out and make your observations and look at each position and see how long does it actually take to complete the task. So you could do that by just going 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's going to give you a pretty close indicator on what it really takes to actually do the job, okay? So now that we understand how many resources that we need and we understand the capacity of the line, this is really gonna help us drive to get to a performance number. So when we start talking about performance numbers in the next few episodes, that has a numerator and a denominator to it to actually get to a true performance measure. Okay, so what we're really looking for now though is to ensure that how do we communicate to our team. So we know what our capacity is. We've talked about that in our huddle meeting with our team. Now we can talk to our teams about what the labor hour requirements for each hour are to meet that capacity. As we come over to our slicer operator, our communication with them is going to be, hey, we only need 100 pounds to come out of the slicer. If we produce any more than 100 pounds, we're actually going to overload the multi-vac and we're not going to be able to keep up, and we may start to see equipment shutdowns. And then as we talk to our pack-off group, we're going to let them know, hey, you're only going to have 100 pounds coming at you at a time. So does that require 1 resource or 2 resources to do that? So we want to make sure we balance our line to fit the capacity requirements that are needed for that line. So remember again, we talk about what are labor hours. Labor hours are what it takes to fill my line to actually produce at the capacity which is needed on that line. We can now measure that every hour. We can go visit our planners and schedulers, or we can go out and do observations on our own to determine what our labor requirements are. And now 3, we have an effective way to communicate on what the requirements are at each station to complete the job for the day, okay? So thank you again for joining me on this video. Go power your productivity. Have a great day.